Chapter 5. The Night Sky. The girl's eyes looked strangely familiar, and she could swear they had met, but Vesper couldn't be sure where or when. They sat cross-legged facing one another, with a small circle drawn in the dirt between them. In the circle were a dozen colored stones, smooth and almost perfectly round. "Are you going to look at the stones all day, or are you going to play?" said the strange girl, fingering a jade necklace around her neck while bouncing a large red stone in her palm. Vesper looked up from the stones, blinking in confusion, noticing that she had a similar blue stone in her hand. The pair of them sat in the corner of a red and green striped tent packed with all sorts of dried goods. Spices, herbs, and pungent-smelling teas that made her wrinkle her nose. A few feet away at the entrance of the tent, a heavy-set woman in colorful robes of cobalt and amber haggled with a bitter-looking man in a dirty turban, while crowds of brightly dressed men and women shuffled by. "It's gonna be a really long game if you keep this up. Just play already." "I don't know how to play," said Vesper, at last finding her voice. The girl in front of her was so beautiful that she couldn't help but stare. She looked young, in her early teens, but she had the figure of a grown woman, the curve of her full breasts apparent under the simple white robe she wore. She had a high forehead with full lips and deep brown skin that was unblemished. Her black hair was plaited against her scalp and fell past her shoulders in a thick woven braid. "That's a new one," the girl shot back, rolling her large eyes. "Are you so afraid I'll beat you again that you're playing dumb?" "No. I swear. I really don't know how to play." "Who are you?" "Where am I?" asked Vesper. "Mama, tell her she has to play. She can't spend all day fluttering around her tree." The heavy-set woman silenced the man she was talking to, with a finger and turned to give them a stern look, waving a whip-like reed at them. "Can't you children see I am with a paying customer? Lilith, stop bothering the girl. If she does not wish to play the game, let her be." The heavy-set woman returned her attention to the man with the filthy turban, and Vesper felt the tent spinning, her confusion deepening. "You're Lilith?" she asked, leaning forward to balance herself against her knees. "How are you here?" Lilith gave her a brilliant smile and shrugged her shoulders. "If you want to know, you have to play the game." "The game?" she asked, looking down to see the stones had vanished, replaced by small statues made of carved soapstone lined up against one another. "Yes, we have to play. I'll probably win, but I'll give you a chance." "Don't trust her, she cheats," spat the heavy-set woman, glaring over her shoulder. "That one will do anything to win." "If you don't like the rules, change the game," said Lilith with a sly wink. Vesper looked down, and the game had changed one more time. This time the circle was a square, filled with stones, some white, some black. Confused, she squeezed her eyes shut trying to remember how she had gotten here, and where was her aunt. Then in a flood of dizziness, it came back, the morning in the garden struggling. And then finally, in the afternoon, making the connection to the lily, and then traveling to the great tree without taking a step, traveling along the connections to faraway places, so many places before finally falling exhausted in her bed. She opened her eyes to find the girl with the big eyes looking at her with a knowing smile. "It's all a dream?" Vesper asked, cocking her head. "None of this is real." "Is it?" Lilith fingered the jade necklace around her throat, her smile growing. "Life is a dream," she began, leaning in close. "Who is to say what is real and what is not? What matters is that we play the game to win." Looking down, Vesper realized the board had changed again. This time it was 6 evenly divided flat stones with circles drawn on them. "No, I don't think I want to play with you. It just doesn't seem fair." Shaking her head, she stood up in an attempt to force herself to wakefulness. To her relief, the tent and everything around her began to shimmer, fading like morning mist at sunrise. The dream had almost completely faded when Lilith was suddenly at her side, gripping her shoulder. Her familiar eyes had gone from a deep brown to almost black, and her smooth unblemished skin was now covered in sores. "Don't worry, Vesper. Eventually, you'll play my game, but until then, I'll be watching." Vesper awoke with a start, her heart pounding out of her chest, sweat rolling off her in waves. She sucked in huge lungfuls of air, trying to calm herself while lying alone in the dark, her eyes darting in all directions as they tried to adjust. For a moment she had no idea where she was or what time it was, but the shafts of pale moonlight shining in through the high window above her bed told her it was well past sundown, and she wondered why her aunt hadn't woken her for supper. Before she could figure it out, her mind went back to what had woken her. She had never had a dream so vivid, so real. She could still smell the pungent odors of the spices in the tent, almost feel the stifling heat of the day. And where Lilith had touched her shoulder, a warmth lingered. She jumped out of her skin when a dog barked in the distance, a small shriek escaping her lips before she could get a hold of herself. Letting out a slow breath to calm her nerves, she pushed the memory of the dream aside. That's when she noticed it, the silence. Even in the dead of night, there should have been the rustle of the leaves blowing in the wind, or the song of some distant night bird. Instead, everything was eerily quiet, and only the sound of her own breath filled her ears. Part of her wanted to crawl under the bed and hide, forget the last few days, but she thought better of it. At the very least she could find her aunt to make sure she was all right. She sat up, rubbing the grit from her eyes while trying to shake off the dull haze of sleep, and regretted it immediately. Her skin throbbed like she'd been burned by the sun, and her joints ached like someone had tried to pull her apart and failed. She vaguely remembered racing into her room after her aunt had scolded her. She'd been fine, maybe a little tired, but that was all. She had fallen into bed with her mind spinning with a mix of excitement and fear at touching the weave for the first time, of traveling along the infinite roads that all connected back to the tree of life. Finally seeing the world for what it really was. A sharp curse from somewhere outside pulled her attention back to the moment, and Vesper's curiosity got the best of her. Wincing through the pain, she stood on shaky legs to go find out what was going on, thinking it would be better if she left behind the terracotta lamp she normally used at this time of night, not wanting its flickering light to draw attention to her. Her aunt had been adamant that she begin her training today and had told her how important tonight would be, explaining to her over and over again that it was a dangerous time if she couldn't learn to control her gifts. Making her way across the cool tile with as much stealth as she could muster, Vesper strained to hear something, anything that would give her a clue as to where her aunt was and what was going on, but there was only silence. When she reached the front of the house, her breath caught in her throat when raised voices bristling with anger reached her ear. "I can't do this anymore. The girl is willful and stubborn." Her mother was the same way, said her aunt. "You chose the duty of preparing her, to see that her power was leashed," said a voice that echoed like whispers on the wind. "I've spoken with the other guardians. Their children are all under control." The hair on Vesper's arms raised as a chill ran through her. What were they going on about? What was she preparing her for? And what other children were they talking about? "She is not like the others," said her aunt with a tremble in her voice. "What she can do, and so quickly. It's terrifying. Excuses will not protect our people, Magda. This crisis grows with each passing day. The children must be ready to take up the mantle." Marcus Aurelius, The emperor is not well and he has refused to adopt an heir when he is dead. His son Commodus will rule, and we have foreseen only pain and suffering for the world. Don't you think I know that? Snapped her aunt. And if you don't believe me, come see her for yourself. Or even better, I will have her come to you. She was halfway to Rome when I caught up with her earlier today and completely destroyed my garden in the process. Impossible. It takes years to do such things. She did. I swear it. She drained every last drop of ace from my garden and would have killed herself if I didn't manage to stop her, and even then it was a close thing. The other voice fell silent, and Vesper bit her lip, bowing her head in worry. Her aunt's words were cold, dismissive, without a trace of affection. It was like she was discussing a herb in her garden, or some weed she could easily discard. "I'm sorry I doubted you," said the voice at last, speaking slower, almost pensive. "Where is the girl now?" Her aunt let out a deep sigh, and when she spoke, there was a tremor in her voice. "I have cast her into torpor. Hopefully they won't reach her if she is in a dreamless sleep. I will have to restart her training tomorrow." "You're playing a dangerous game, Magda. If you've waited too long the world will suffer." "I have not," said Magda in a stern tone that brooked no argument. "This came on much faster than anticipated, but if I must, I will take the necessary steps to protect us all." "You would do such a thing to your own blood?" "As you said. I swore an oath to protect this world," said Magda. "I will do what I must." "Then I pray that you are right. And if you're not, it is my hope that the other children will be enough." Vesper clutched her midsection, her stomach turning like someone had kicked her in the gut. They were supposed to be family, but with every word her aunt spoke to the strange voice, she realized her entire life was all a lie. The woman who was raising her, who she thought loved her, didn't care. She only took care of her because of some oath, out of a sense of duty. Worse, if Vesper understood what was being discussed, she would be cast aside if her aunt decided it was necessary. Squeezing her eyes shut, she pushed back tears. It would do her no good to show weakness now, like she was some small child that needed to be coddled. She would show her aunt how defiant she could be. Ignoring the pain in her limbs and the ache on her skin, she stood up straight despite her shaking legs. Raising her chin high, she stepped out.